clicking this video. I'm Matthew Msangati, the designer YouTube channel Coded Design, where I teach coding and user interface design. This is a series of videos where I teach you advanced PHP application. As you can see, if it's your first time here, this is the series. This series aims at teaching you like a production level code, not just code for learning a particular language, but for building real life and advanced application. As you can see, this is the application that I'm building, Secular. It can you can log in, you can register, and also it can verify your email. Okay, so that's about it. But now we are talking about design patterns in Laravel. We've already covered singleton design pattern in Laravel. So now I wanted us to check the factory pattern. A factory, it's a design pattern that states that you need to have a class called factory that will manufacture all the dependencies for you. So it's a design pattern. Meanwhile, I'm searching here for a factory. We might as well go to the internet and some sort of search for a factory pattern. Okay, let's say Google. Okay, factory pattern. Let's see what's the definition. Okay, let me ask, what is a factory pattern? Okay, in class-based programming, the factory method pattern is a creational pattern. Sorry about that. It's a creational pattern that uses factory method to deal with the problem of creating object without having to specify the exact class of the object that will be created. This design pattern some sort of manages or solves the problem of creating objects. As I've mentioned before, if you've got many classes, you'll find out that this class, it's a dependency for another class, meaning that it's used by another class. Let's try to be as realistic as possible. Let's say we're creating an accounting system, and then we've got an invoice class. Okay, the invoice class will deal with currency, because in the invoice you must state like how much there must be some sort of money, and also there must be a unit of measure. So for instance, in South Africa we use rands, and in other places they use dollars, euros, and nairas, and so forth. So you might want to, let's say the application that I've done, obviously I'm based in South Africa, I'm using rands, but what if maybe it's being used by let's say people who are in United States? That will mean that there must be a change in currency. Some sort of currency must be converted. So as much as I'm creating an invoice class, but if it's going to display the amount of money, that will mean, let's say, this is just for an example, that will mean it must use a class currency so that it doesn't have to deal with converting amounts, because it will violate the principle number one, the single responsibility principle. Because now if it starts converting and it gets lost into currency affairs, it's like somebody who's taking care of the neighbor's issues, who always stick their nose into neighbor's issues or everyone else's business. So that means the invoice class must remain an invoice. So in order for it to do that, it must take currency as a dependency, so that it can just use it to convert the currency. So you can see that we've got invoice as a consuming class, a class that consumes currency, but currency might have other dependencies that it needs. For instance, let's say since we are dealing with currencies, let's say it uses another class called currency conversion, meaning that that class only has a table of conversion, like maybe formulas. to convert a US dollar into rands and whatever. So that means even currency as a class, it needs also another class. As you can see that there is some sort of a chain of dependencies. So a factory method pattern comes in to rescue and say that, okay, since there is some sort of a chain of instantiations here, you call this class thinking that it's just a solid class, but you'll find out this class depends on two other classes, and also it depends on two other classes. Then it becomes some sort of a little bit of a mess. So you must have a factory, just like a factory in real life that manufactures products and items. You must have a factory. The factory will only be responsible for managing that mess, meaning that it will have let's say a class called currency converter. It will have a class called currency, and also it will have a class called invoice in one class. So whenever the class invoice needs two more dependencies, this factory method will quickly get those dependencies, because those dependencies are inside it, and it doesn't sweat much to create those new instances, because number one, it specializes on that instead of taking that responsibility and pushing it to invoice. Whereas now invoice, instead of creating and generating an invoice, it needs to be lost in currencies. So that's about it when it comes to a factory pattern. Now let's jump back to Laravel and see if we can get a class here that acts as a factory that will create objects for Laravel. Let's just quickly go to definition of this function. Maybe it will take us to a class that is a factory. Okay, function factory. This one is a function. Okay, or new factory. Let's see. Yes, that's a new factory. Okay, let's see what this function does. Okay, I think this class is a factory. Let's go to the definition of this class, the class itself. Okay, abstract class factory. Okay, this is an abstract class. It's not the actual class, it's an abstract class. Okay, let's see. Okay, as you can see that this abstract factory class, it has got a function public static function new, and then what does this function does, it receives some attributes in terms of an array. Yes, it says got an array, and then it return new state. As you can see, it's newing things up. So a factory, what a factory does, it's responsible for creating those objects. If whatever that it's being newed up needs a dependency, then the class already has that dependency. For instance, here this is an empty array. Okay, let's look for another class. Let me check. Okay, let's just go down a little bit to look for another has factory. No, to look for another factory class here in Laravel. User factory. Okay, let's check another one. Factory method. No. Auto load factory. Okay, let's see, scroll down. Sorry about that. Okay, let me just say class factory, hoping that Laravel has a class which is just called factory. I think here is it, class factory. Obviously it's, I think this that abstract, or it's a different one. Okay, let's just look here at this class and see what it does. As you can see, it's called factory. Okay, let's see if it has got some functions that are responsible for newing up things, for instantiating things. Okay, let me just be clever and create new here. Okay, Okay, as you can see here, they are returning a new eloquent collection. Okay, so meaning that this is new, that means you are creating an object, and that object is eloquent collection. But this eloquent collection takes some dependencies. As you can see, everything that is inside here, these are dependencies. And as you can see that these dependencies, it's not like it's just, what can I say, it's just one class, let's say a class called factory or router or whatever. But as you can see, there is some sort of a collection, and then you call a mapper method. Inside that mapper method, you call a function, and then you pass record, which is iterable, that you've received here when you are creating. And then from then, it's going to be a function, and then it's going to return this dot stage dot record dot create. As you can see, that creating this object is not as easy. Imagine if you have to create an object like this inside a class that deals with invoices. It will mean that now the invoice class is going to be busy doing the work that is not supposed to do, and that breaks or violates the single responsibility principle in solid principle. That S stands for single responsibility. So this is a perfect example of a factory at work, because as you can see, creating an eloquent collection is not as easy. It involves a lot of things, and if you do this in another class which is not a factory, it will mean that class will do 80% of the work. It will be creating objects, of which that's not efficient. If you have an invoice class, it must spend like 99% of the time or its production time creating the invoice, doing what it's supposed to do. So guys, that is it for me. You can see what a factory does in Laravel. I've also got a factory in this application, but at the moment I call my factories dependency injection containers, because they just contain all the dependencies. It's like a bag of dependencies or a bucket of dependencies. That's a factory. So those dependencies are being created inside that bucket. So I always take that bucket and push it into my application. Whenever I want to use a dependency, I'll always call it from that bucket. Otherwise, for me, Matthew Msingati, the developer, that's about it. If you feel like this video added value into your overall understanding of a factory method, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, this is this series teaching you advanced PHP skills. And then I've got some cool stuff here, or informational videos and playlist. So if you've got some time, please visit my channel and subscribe, so that you can help me to help others. Otherwise, for me, Matthew Msingati, see you on the next one.